there was a post on Twitter, I want to say 2 days ago. And then one VC said, don't isn't the TAM slide in every deck just BS? And I'm like, it's not all BS, but it helps me figure out how you think of the market.
Welcome to the Message Engineer podcast. I'm here today with Lenard Marcus. Lenard is a general partner with Edison Partners, an award-winning growth investment firm, making it onto GrowthCap's short list of best growth investment firms for the second year in a row. Lenard co-leads the enterprise software practice and makes investments primarily in healthcare IT. Lenard also serves on the board of Kemp Technologies, eSentire, Lincor, and Clinvers, as well as serving as a board observer for the Premier Health Exchange, or PHX. Lenard earned his industrial engineering degree at Stanford and his MBA at Columbia. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
So we start with kind of what I call define the word warm up. So a couple of words that are important in your sphere and we need to know more about. So one, which based on our pre-recording conversation should be an interesting one. Pitch deck.
Pitch deck. I define pitch deck as an introduction to a company that enables you to learn what they do, why they're unique, and why their uniqueness will be sustained.
Great answer. What, why, and sustained. And since Edison Partners is a growth equity investment firm, growth.
So it's really part of our thesis and growth equity. You know, as venture expanded beyond venture and you became different segments, growth equity, we are supposed to be accelerators of growth. And because of that, the companies that we are investing in generally take our capital because they found product market fit, albeit sometimes in the early stages of product market fit, and they're taking our capital to expand sales and marketing. So growth equity, you're going to see varied definitions, and some view it as companies 40 million and above, some as low as 5 million. We view it as companies generally 10 to 30 million, and they're taking our capital to step on the accelerator.
All right. And so with that, when they're coming to you, last word, message.
The message to me, it needs to be defined by the entrepreneur. And it's what do you want to leave with me or any investor once the conversation is over? And to me, it should be part of your strength. It's your strength, your team. You have three or four founders who've quote unquote done this before, or is there a uniqueness to your skill sets that makes you one of the 1 to 3 top people in the world that should qualify to do this venture? Or is it your technology? But to me, it should be your uniqueness, but also always what should come through is your drive.
Great answer. The idea of message being what the investor, you are left with when the meeting is over, right? What to remember, what's conveyed,
right? And
from the founders, so that you're aware that 1 to 3 of the top people in the world qualified to do this, or uniquely qualified to do this.
Yes.
So, great point. So, for folks, can you talk a little bit about the difference between in your mind between, there's usually this continuum of, it can go there are many paths, right?
Mm-hmm.
But let's say stereotypically kind of angel seed, kind of series A, B, et cetera, right? Some non-dilutive mixed in there. Where in this kind of 10 to 30 are you usually coming in? Is that like a bigger series A? Is that a series B? What kind of round is that? What are you looking to have happened in advance of them coming to you?
Overwhelmingly, we are still Series A investors. Mm-hmm. And that's because we've built a really good deal sourcing mechanism that we've had and sort of become known for in the industry. And so what we've been able to do is find entrepreneurs who are bootstrapping and and we view them as we get to know them, they're going to be as cautious with our dollars as they have with their own. Mm-hmm. So in the majority of our investments, we're actually still Series A. Now that said, toward the larger end of the spectrum, we're Series B investors. And from that, in that relationship, once you have multiple investors at the table, you just want to make sure that you share the same thoughts on the outcome, the goal from both a magnitude of the sale as well as a timing. People forget that we can't hold on forever. We're not in that business. We have limited partnerships. Our funds generally have 10-year partnerships, 10-year horizons. And so there is an exit, and we're not forever investors. And we have to make sure that we're aligned with the Series A investor in those circumstances.
So that makes a lot of sense with that. And so process-wise, it's interesting. You mentioned that you have a unique way that you're known for deal sourcing, for finding these more kind of bootstrapped investments. I think somewhere on your site I saw that you prefer folks to have not done any raises prior to coming out.
I don't know if we said prefer. It's just we've got a really good group of analysts and associates. We always have. I actually started off at Edison, smiling and dialing, as I said. And so you get acclimated to pounding the pavement, going to the conferences. And we try to hire people with an intellectual curiosity so that they can go off on tangents and just find these gems, so to speak. And so we've been able to do that continuously since I joined. And because of that, we're Series A investors a lot of the time. But again, as I say, as we move up and raise a larger fund and the target rate goes from 5 to 10 to 10 to 30, we're certainly Series B investors. And then it gets, you have to have a good relationship with your Series A investor and your angels. And on the East Coast, what happened in the time frame from 16 to early 22, 14 months ago when the music stopped, as I call it. You just had a lot of New York has a lot of sophisticated angels that had really replaced the traditional Series A investors. And so we have to develop these relationships, get a rapport to make sure that we're aligned long-term for the life of the investment.
Yeah, on the end goal, on the time, you said the timeline and the goals, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And some kind of liquidity at some point on that timeline.
That's what we're all playing for. But it changes over time with performance. There could be personal circumstances for management. And so we always have to have an open dialogue, open lines of communication.
I thought that was one of the really interesting things that I saw on your website, and was this idea of tact, right? Trust, accountability, commitment, and transparency.
Yeah.
And I have it here. We communicate openly, honestly, and directly, saying what we mean and mean what we say. And I hear from a lot of people that that's maybe not always the case, or that's not their perception that that's always the case when they're working with investors. And so why is that something that's really important to Edison, and what do you look for then in other people to make sure they're matching with your?
Well, it's the reason it's with us is we have what we call the Edison Edge, and that's a group of operating partners. So if I sit on your board, you're not just getting me. You're gonna get, Greg Nicastro, who helps with product. You're gonna get Marianne McDonough, who helps with go to market. And so we're gonna have multiple touch points that in the sale process, diligence, and post-closing are trying to help everyone succeed. And hopefully through those multiple touch points, you'll get the fact that we're only here to optimize the outcome. Mm-hmm. During the initial selling process, not to be confused with the sale process post-investment, when I'm trying to get we're all working hard to try to get the founder or founders to select Edison over someone else. I'm being pretty honest and straightforward. I'm known for being pretty direct with what I see as the pluses, the challenges, and the things that we need to work together to do post-investment. And I think more often than not, the mature founder or founders appreciate that. And oftentimes they know they just want they can appreciate a second set of eyes or groups of eyes, and it is to tell them that. Because many times as founders, it's, you're drinking from the fire hose, and you rarely have time to stop, take a step back. Running a business is tough. It's a full-time job.
And then some.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yes. You've been in that position.
Yeah. Yes, I have. Some times are easier than other times, but it's all upside and it's all learning. So that's good. So when, one of the things a lot of people wonder about, different firms have different ways of, and so you have this unique way of having your analysts go out and kind of scour and look for these gems, you call them. Mm-hmm. If folks are approaching you, what is the process? I see people saying, "Oh, I heard I have to have a 2-page kind of memo background or formatted that I need to send in. It's like a mini business plan." I've heard other people say, "No, it's a short form of your pitch deck," and other people say, "No, it's the executive summary of your business plan."
It literally can be any or all of the above, and I get outreach, certainly on a weekly, if not daily basis. A 1-pager, something, 2-pager, anything that can summarize in a really granular format what you do, why you're unique, and then why you want to raise capital. Those are the 3 most important things. And if I get that, you'll, and it's in a segment that we like, Edison likes, I'll either take it myself, send you internally to the partner or the team that really focuses on that segment. But we're going to be sure to review and really learn more about the opportunity.
And then if folks, what sort of folks are you seeing, or what sorts of deals? And you specialize in healthcare IT, and there's a lot happening in healthcare IT, right? And a lot happening in healthcare overall. And one of the things I heard at AvaMed's, the Medtech conference in October, November, that all this, like the CEO of Medtronic and BD and the larger firms were talking about, was it used to be, which is what I historically know, is, it has to be a clinical, there has to be a clinical need. You need to understand that, and you have to have kind of the economic, needs, the economic story needs to match up as well across the range of individuals, right, who weigh in, if you will. I call it the customer constellation sometimes. There are a lot of people. And so they started to talk about, now there's a third piece. Now there's a third pillar, right? And it's workflow. Whereas 20 years ago, if you talked about saving time, people were like, I don't care. Like, unless you're replacing a human being, and so I can monetize it, what do I care about saving 10 minutes in the OR? And so I'm wondering, from the healthcare IT perspective, are you finding that workflow is something that has risen up? Is it something that folks are trying to solve? Something
It
you're
definitely is. And I think a couple of drivers. One is, as you move to value-based care, you are going to have to prove that you manage the patient in a much more efficient manner, and you improve outcomes, and you decrease readmissions. And the only way you can do that is through continuity between the different segments of healthcare. Now, you've worked in healthcare, and everyone listening to podcasts may not have the same level of exposure. Healthcare is a very segmented, siloed industry. My wife's a physician, and I think on any day she goes to as many as 7 different systems, to get data for her patient. So workflow is going to be a big part of it, in conjunction with interoperability, because you're trying to there's a push to get one standard information system or information format for healthcare. And there's been that push for a long, long time. And so healthcare is still very much behind the other verticals or industries. And so workflow is definitely going to have to help, because you don't want to be viewed as a burden. And oftentimes, healthcare views anything that changes the status quo as a burden. If you think of EMR, EHRs, Cerner went public in the mid '80s. EMRs were. I remember my wife's mother's a physician. She wrote her when she was at Michigan Medical School in the late '80s, early '90s, and yet you had the U.S. didn't exceed 51% of adoption of EMR HR until 2015, I believe, when Obama incented. And why is that? Because if you talk to any practice, they implemented EMR HR, it killed their workflow. And I saw a report that said less than 5% ever returned to the initial throughput that they did prior to the EMR HR. And that's bad, because in the old pay for a service, it's as many patients as you get paid. Mm-hmm. Now you shift to value-based care. You have to have interoperability is going to be a key component. But fortunately, what's happened, and I think a big silver lining is COVID and the push to what we are doing, just virtual care. Mm-hmm. and practices adopting telehealth. And you talk to many, and they would see ROI in 6 months.
Wow.
I had one say that it was in less than 3 months. And I've heard several physicians in their late 60s say it's the first time they adopted anything in healthcare, any technology, that had a less than 2-year ROI. Wow. So it's huge for them, just because they realize it can be done.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yes.
Right.
It works. It works.
But everything else, time doesn't help. It may help with safety. My wife is a gynecological oncologist, and she'll use the robots for smaller surgical margins, as they say. It helps with safety, but those procedures are an hour and a half longer.
No, it's not. Right. It's more precise and takes more time to be more precise. Right. To hopefully get a better result, better margins, cleaner margins. That makes sense. I think in the healthcare IT side in this, you're talking a little bit about the continuity and about telehealth. And it's interesting to think about, because there's a lot of chatter about continuum of care, right? And to your point about interoperability. And then when you get everything connected and when everything's interoperable and you can see it all somewhere, right? And you've dropped some machine learning, deep learning, whatever's appropriate into it, and are able to roll up insights, not just to giant data trove in the direction of a provider or physician
Right.
or patient. To get that continuum working, how does that happen? Where do you start? It feels a bit like, eating an elephant in a way.
Where does it start? My sense is it has to start at the primary care. This is a hell of a question. You're asking me to solve healthcare. The biggest problem.
It's a sunny day in New Jersey.
My sense is it has to start with the primary care physician. That's just my sense, only because that's the physician that patients see the most often. Mm-hmm. The challenge is when you have a condition and you have to see a specialist. The specialists and the primary care have to be able to see the same patient record, the same timing of the patient record. I've met many people who unfortunately have lost loved ones because of lack of coordination between the primary care and the specialist. This patient's diabetic, didn't know they're diabetic. This patient's allergic to this procedure, and you go for your dialysis, and they just didn't know. And a lot of the dialysis providers still use fax. That's generally a much older doctor. A lot of younger physicians don't want to work in that segment. So I think it starts with primary care, but it also starts with then on the back end, moving to a language or a protocol that's universal. You finally get all the EMRs. You force them to share data. There've actually been legislation involved, but all we know that a couple of the large ones, and I'm not going to name them, have still refused to share data. And then what will happen is you'll have one holistic real-time view of the patient. You'll be aware of everything he or she is allergic to, susceptible to, and they can be treated most accurately and most appropriately. Now, the challenge is, what I actually think is going to happen is going to be the actual reverse, and it's going to start with the specialist. And that's because you have, 50,000 people a week turning 55 or 65, the baby boomers. And they have a lot of political capital. They get listened to, and they're going to speak loudly and be heard. And because of age, you're going to have a population that's already, let's just say, more medicated than their younger counterparts. And so it may actually start at the specialist.
That's a great point. Yeah, there's that growth in the prevalence of chronic conditions, the number of chronic conditions, and people once, the magical age of 65, we start, they all go into the government.
Yeah, and you have a lot of factors that'll say that the catalyst is going to be from the older, because you're going to have aging at home. My European business school friends, why don't you guys live with your parents? I was like, well, I don't know. We don't love our parents any less. They just like to live in their own places, So now you've got, a lot of the care management, or a lot of the specialists are going to have care management as an offshoot of practice, things like that. A lot of possibilities.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to think, do you think, and I need to get back to kind of the investment piece, but telehealth and kind of going to places to get care, where do you see it? We've seen the boom in telehealth, right? Because of kind of pandemic fueled, if you will.
Sure.
And that's kind of off to the races. It's certainly more convenient. I've definitely used it at times when I'm perfectly capable of making an appointment. It's a pain to make an appointment. It's a pain to wait 3 to 4 weeks to get a slot when I can jump on my computer and do other work while it sits there and ticks the clock away, and bang, up comes the person, up comes the physician, right? So they have access to my records, or some portion of them, right? They're associated with Hackensack.
Yeah. Telehealth is here to stay. I think you've had some segments of different industries that were called COVID fads. Telehealth is not one of them. No one wants to go to the hospital or the doctor. As you just stated, if you can pull him or her up on your computer, and you have a situation that can be addressed via telehealth, why not? It's convenience. We are, healthcare aside, our lives are much more complex, much more time consuming. I don't work 40 hours a week like my parents did. And so telehealth is here to stay. No question.
Fair point. I could go down a whole road on that. I just find it really fascinating what's happening in healthcare, right? You and I have been in this kind of general space, if you will, of healthcare for a while. And it's exciting to see all the change that's taking place.
It's good. It's good to see the providers and the payers recognizing that they spent money and got their money's worth with the telehealth investment. That's what's good, because that'll hopefully sort of be a catalyst to look. The sales cycles are still going to be long when you sell to a hospital, because they tend to make decisions by committees. But the fact that they were able to invest in something that gave them a quick ROI and help their business should help the next product that someone's trying to sell into them.
Your purview of healthcare IT. We've touched on telehealth. We've mentioned hospitals, let's say health systems. Home came up.
Sure.
Where with healthcare IT, we've talked about moving towards interoperability, right? Continuum of care, those kind of like lofty future goals. What are some of the things right now that are kind of most interesting to you? Is it still healthcare IT in hospital and hospital systems? Is it folks who can kind of extend, like Brigham's buying up durable medical equipment providers and getting into the home marketplace? Is it?
I think that's going to continue. You're going to see the sort of localization of care, and I think you're going to continue to see companies like City Block or things of that nature, where everything's becoming local. I also think, taking a step back and is, I considered healthcare IT, some would call it pharma IT. You saw with COVID now ability to get drugs to market, in 18 months, as opposed to, I was always told 12 to 13 years. Technologies and systems that help, the clinical research and clinical trial process. And where will we sort of normalize in a post-COVID world for the average drugs, for non-pandemic? And then hopefully it's not back to, 13 years. It won't be 12 to 24 months, but hopefully it's somewhere in between.
Yeah, the ability to reduce the time to market.
Yeah, you just have to.
Yeah,
you just have to.
And I think
along the population demographics, just the ability to, aging in home is going to be, aging in place is just going to be big. And so the ability to provide a good care continuity for seniors and it's going to test and really push the envelope with the interoperability. But it's going to be really important over the next, several decades.
There's a lot of talk. I find it interesting to see that in places like there's a lobby group called Moving Health Home that I think Amazon's definitely a part of. I think Walmart's a part of, and then like CVS and Amwell and some of the usual suspects are in there as well. And to think about this concept of logistics and our companies really best set up, whether it's healthcare or even like a Cardinal or a Medline, are they set up to be the folks who are providing, or is it still DME? Or does DME shift and go away and become something else?
Right.
How do you logistically get things to those patients and then get information back out, right? And we see, as with most new markets, a lot of fragmentation, or at least I see a lot of fragmentation. I have this cool remote blood pressure monitor, and I have this cool remote. I'll let you know if grandma hasn't gotten out of bed in a day, 24 hours. And I have, right, there's this plethora happening, which is really interesting to see. And then you see kind of the middle children, like the current health, who are trying to take all that data in and ingest it and pipe it out to the EHR to make some sense of it. I mean, where are some of the kind of trends? Where do you see things kind of heading?
I think it's going to be important that you get some of the new players. You mentioned Amazon. You get some of these people in here that have expertise from another industry to help with things like logistics. And I think what'll happen is that'll force the incumbents to sort of raise their bar and think differently. And because, again, of the population demographics, I think everyone has an interest in healthcare. You'll see Salesforce with a care management platform. Google has played in healthcare in multiple ways, sort of dipping their toe, and I think they're trying to find the optimal angle, particularly for the larger public companies. But I do think that's going to be a segment where you're going to get multiple players. Traditionally, in other segments that are going to come in and help that continue to trend in the optimal direction for service.
And what do you think I love thinking about adjacencies and adjacent industries because there's so much we can learn from them.
Adjacencies in adjacent industries. Okay.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm saying the same thing twice for double emphasis. And there's so much to be learned I like stick my head up outside of healthcare, look around.
Yeah.
Right? There's so many other things happening outside of the U.S. as well, as you pointed out with your European friends and colleagues.
Yeah.
That we have the opportunity to learn that we never really got great at in healthcare, that other people have become really good at.
And I'm not sure why that is. I mean, if you think of the U.S., because I had this conversation years ago in business school, it's our healthcare system is very local. If you think of countries, most will have several payers, and we have different states. Your healthcare is by your state, so it's very local. It was always that way, and it's worked. And the challenge for us as a country is to figure out over the next several decades, how do we continue to evolve, to optimize it, and frankly, drive out some costs. I sit on the board of a company, Capital RX, which is a 2.0 PBM. And one of the things they're working to do is just have price transparency for drug costs for employers. And unbeknownst to me, prior to making an investment, there was never any pricing data in a PBM contract with an employer.
Really?
Yeah. And so, you just have certain segments of healthcare which are very bloated. But then you have certain aspects where we have to continue to improve. I mean, my wife's physician, and she was talking to me last week about shortage of cancer drugs. I had no idea there was a shortage of cancer drugs. But the U.S. right now is under its worst drug shortages in the last 20 years. And so we have to manage all of this as, we are the number one, I don't have to tell you, country in the world for drug consumption. Yeah, so these things need to be top of mind for us.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you see as some of the interesting roles that healthcare IT can play in moving towards this more transparent, continuum of care, aging in home. I mean, what are some of the things that healthcare IT is doing or needs to do, or that is maybe not so obvious?
I think several things, and we've touched on a couple of them, but having doctors, all physicians, primary care specialists, you name it, have access to the accurate patient data. So the interoperability and the workflow, sort of where we started the conversation, I think is just going to be crucial. I think continued use of and refinement of telehealth. You're going to have, as you have aging at home, you just want to be able to check in on these patients. Mm-hmm. I think technologies, I'm trying to remember the name of the company, it's escaping me, where the diabetics can actually get their blood sugar measured without pricking their fingers. Diabetes is very, very prevalent in my family. So that would be huge. And that's literally the number one most costly condition to our healthcare system. So managing diabetes, improving management of diabetics would certainly help from cost management. And then I think just continued adoption and shift toward value-based care is going to help have the physicians and the practitioners really incented to improve care and continue the shift away from what I call the old throughput model.
The volume model.
Yeah.
Right.
So to me, those are just going to be huge.
I think that if we roll back for a minute too, we kind of like went deep down the healthcare, down into healthcare. We kind of zoom back out for a minute. I get a lot of questions as to when we started earlier, what should I do as far as outreach, and then what
Mm-hmm.
happens? And so could you give us kind of what that process looks like and what you're looking for, what maybe some, positive signs along the way and some red flags along the way?
So here, first, rule number one, reach out to people or entities that have a history of investing in companies in your sector. And it's funny, I've touched on it before, but I'll touch on it from the antithesis. The ones I don't like receiving are, I'm investing in, or I've got a great idea for a new rail system. I read your site. I've seen Edison Partners. I'm like, you didn't read my site. You didn't read it. I was like, I'm not, I'm probably not going to do that one. So I would say all of VCs, whether it's growth equity, early stage, late stage PE, they tend to list their portfolio companies. They tend to list their area of focus. You have HLM and others that only do healthcare. So if you're a healthcare CEO and entrepreneur, you probably can't go wrong there because it's likely they've done some aspect or segment, some investment over the years. But be cognizant of those that have an interest in your segment. I'd say number two, try to reach out to both a senior person and a junior person. The everyone is tasked with trying to find new deals. Overwhelmingly, your focus on that declines as you ascend in the industry. And I think the third thing is try to see if you have any, check LinkedIn, become a LinkedIn guru. Do you have any representative who can either provide a warm introduction or vouch for you in your last job or venture of some sort? And I think from there, the way we work in teams, you have the healthcare team, T-team, enterprise, fintech, and we discuss the various opportunities, and then we talk about why we have an interest in a specific company or sub-segment, industry sub-segment. And then I would say the other big thing is know how much money you need, and is that aligned with, and align that with the entity. If you only need $2 million, we're typically writing, 12, 15 million minimum checks. Mm-hmm. So know that the entities you're reaching out with and the checks that they write align with your need.
All right. So check out the portfolio companies. Don't approach you with railway system ideas when you invest in healthcare IT.
Yeah.
I'm guessing maybe that actually happened.
Yes. It's been a lot of them. You just like, oh, right here. I'm like, you didn't read the website.
That reminds my first interview question is always, why do you want to work for insert name of company?
Right. And if you can't
and then
answer
if you're
that,
like, well, I don't know. It's very short. It's very short.
Very short interview. Short interview.
Reaching out to kind of a junior and senior person. Great idea. Great advice. And trying to find a warm intro. Someone who can say.
And there's a misconception that you have to have. You don't have to have a warm intro. It just helps. You don't have to have a warm intro at all.
And then making sure that what you're looking for aligns with what you all are providing.
Yeah.
Money-wise.
Right.
So that makes a lot of sense. So then let's say whatever they've sent you or however they've been introed, you say, hey, this looks interesting to us. We want to talk to them. What does that next step look like?
Next step is call. And an intro call for me, I try to break the ice and be transparent and say, look, I just want to hear about your background. Why'd you start the company? What do you feel like makes you, the product, unique? And then how much capital you want to raise. And so usually it's a 30 to 40 minute call. I want to really get a feel for them, actually in the intro call more so than the actual company and their ability to position the company and what comes through when they do that. And then after that, I'll debrief with my team, and if I felt it was compelling, we'll either go to a combination of second call or a meeting.
And then what are you looking for in that second meeting? So you've done the call, you have a sense for the person, you know a little bit about the company. At this meeting, is it typically you or you and a couple of
myself, folks? A couple of colleagues. Usually we'll put a couple of partners on the deal, as well as I'll certainly grab someone from my operating team, as well as the associate or analyst on the deal for first in-person meeting. Mm-hmm. Really want to go through the pipeline and talk about the product. Why is it unique? Mm-hmm. We tend to be technology and technology-enabled services investors. So there's generally a product involved. Why is it unique? How do you develop it? How do you manage development? How do you manage the pipeline and go to market? And then get an idea of near-term momentum. And then the most important is get their thoughts on the competition. And then the total addressable market. And I'm laughing when I say that because there was a post on Twitter, I want to say 2 days ago. And one VC said, don't isn't the TAM slide in every deck just BS? And I'm like, it's not all BS, but it helps me figure out how you think of the market.
Mm-hmm. It's always over $1 billion.
I think everyone's been told it's got to be $1 billion market. But I will never, unless I think it's ridiculous, I will never to a founder say, it's no way it's $1 billion. As we're leaving, going home, I'll tell my colleagues, yeah, there's no way that's $1 billion market.
So let one quick kind of dive in on this. we went through this period of, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this, of, right, TAM's been around for a long time, right? Total available market. And then there's SAM and SOM and, right? So do you want to see all of those? Are you good with TAM as long as they can talk to it and explain where they're starting, like how that boils down and where they're starting?
As long as at that point, as long as they can talk to it and explain where they're starting. And then what then we can do is go and look in various segments and see, okay, how much of this market is generally available annually. A lot of healthcare tends to be lumpy. And again, the decision-making process is a little more, just not as smooth as some of the other segments. And so we're trying to see, is how much is available annually, new product replacement, greenfield, and the nature, things of that nature. And that we can get from our various analysts we know, people within the industry. At Edison, we have what we call the Edison Director Networks. These are people who work with us for years that are in healthcare, fintech, and we can call them and have outreach to get the triangulate to a proper number.
That makes a lot of sense. Triangulating on the number. I always figure if we're building
it's always a guess, and oftentimes we aren't accurate. But you also have to account for an ability and the portability of what someone does and its portability to other segments. I mean, in addition to healthcare, I do cyber, and my at a company eCentire, that when we invested 90% of their, and they are a MDR, managed detection and response. So they manage your cyber posture for you, and respond if you get hacked. They were 90% hedge funds. I'm like, oh, the hedge fund industry isn't that big. I'm like, yeah, but if you think of it, everyone needs this. I said, and this is about 9 years ago. And so then they went and they were very good at segmenting the market. All right, so what are other sectors that have very important or high-priced assets online and don't have great healthcare or great IT? So we went from hedge funds to larger financial services to oil and gas to healthcare to legal. Boom. So we still own a small portion. We recapped over $1 billion, and eCentire is continuing to grow extremely well. So you have to account for the portability of what this entity does to other sectors or subsegments.
Where other markets into which it can grow or scale, is it?
Bingo.
Yeah, it can expand. That makes a lot of sense. So they come in, they do the kind of in real life meeting. You're looking at go-to-market, partners. Your partners in the room, the op teams in the room, go-to-market, pipeline, product, competition in particular. When do you then expect to be able to get entrance to a deal room where your analysts can get all the rest of the information they need?
So after that point, we're asking them for financials. We usually like to get, last 2 years quarterly, current year projected next year. Mm-hmm. And then what we'll do is we'll prepare an internal memo for what we call our deal room, which we have every Monday. Initially, we'll have a one-pager early in the process, introduce the company, tell them why we like it. And you'll get feedback around the table. Say, okay, we'd like to know a little more about this, X, Y, Z. As we get deeper into the process and we learn more after we get access and to the greater materials, additional materials, we'll provide a more substantive memo and propose to our team, here's what we think a deal looks like. And at that point, you'll get feedback on the parameters of the deal. And once you have that internally, I can present something to the management team. an IOI, indication of interest. And we'll go back and forth because they never just take it and say, yes, we'll take this.
Right. Term sheet, we love it.
Exactly. We'll
shocking.
Go back and forth. And assuming we can consummate deal and they sign it, usually we're asking for, 50 days. Still not back to used to be 60. Then when again, it's 16 to 23 when the run up, when everything got hot, it got as low as 30 or 35, which doesn't make sense. But during diligence, we are doing a tech review. We go in, we study make sure the database is scalable. We get a third party to do that, review the sales, the development processes. We'll go a deep dive on the go-to-market, marketing, positioning, management of the pipeline. And then we'll have an internal resource do an accounting review to ensure that management of payables, receivables, cash management is, and if it's not up to snuff, it's something we can get up to an appropriate level investment. I should say appropriate level post investment. And then what we're doing is we're creating what we call the 180-day plan, and we say these are the things that we want to really focus on the first 180 days post investment. And these things could be, hiring a CTO, hiring a VP engineering, ensuring getting all the management properly incented from a bonus perspective. Oftentimes, prior to investment, every senior manager has a bonus. That bonus isn't tied to the company's, revenue, EBITDA, and what we'll try to do is align it. Okay, X% if you hit this, the various metrics that we work with management to identify, drive, or optimize enterprise value. And we're working to get their sign off on the 180-day plan before we're wiring.
For the money transfers.
Before the money.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Has to be, have to get that buy-in before the money hits the bank. Yeah.
Right. So you have a clear view of what's going to get them to, on the trajectory that you need them to be on.
We do. And because we're momentum investors, oftentimes they're on that trajectory on the early stages of it, but they may have, again, almost no alignment between the senior team and what the company actually achieves. Mm-hmm. Really in the infancy of HR, you've got to have, recruiting, again, 12 months ago was extremely hard for about 3 or 4 years from 18 to 19 to 22. Get HR in place. There's several key components that tend to be lacking. And then it's driving a common voice with the management team and the board.
That makes a lot of sense. What are, when you've done investments, what are some of the commonalities that you see with these teams that set them apart from, let's say, the majority of folks who you have, send in materials or be introduced to you? Kind of what's the difference?
I think when you have a team that has sort of the major components covered, so product, go to market, and then just strong leadership. Mm-hmm. Leadership is an intangible. It's viewed very differently to different people, but you can generally tell when you're sitting with a group if there's a good degree of cohesion, if everyone's on the same page, and that just counts tremendously. It's great to have a great product offering, a great technology. When everyone has an oar and everyone's or has a paddle and you're paddling the same direction, then you're likely to have much greater success.
I like that, a paddle in and in the same direction.
Yeah.
One does not necessarily indicate
Yeah.
the other.
Yeah, but also you want teams that have an open environment where they can challenge each other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you're looking for leaders and not really kings and queens. At least that's what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Not looking for kings and queens. All right. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, go ahead.
No, I said no. That's great.
Awesome. So we have that. We have the term sheet. I wanted to ask you a couple of things. One, when I was in Silicon Valley, when I lived in San Francisco for 8 years,
I
there
forget that you lived down there. Fine.
I lived in a few places.
Yeah.
And there was this term. I remember sitting down with this one investor, and he had put in, I think, $1 million of his own money. He had built prototypes. He had advisors. He had a board. And he had term sheets. He had 3 term sheets, and he didn't like them.
Do you remember why? It had to be price. Price is usually the number one.
It's founder and dilution, right? And there was this phrase of eat when you are served, which meant, I don't know if it's still around, but which meant if you were building something and people want to give you money and you don't like what it looks like, you ought to take it and live to fight another day. Take it and then rocket ship yourself forward and then go for the better deal. So I'm wondering, I hear a lot of angst from early stage founders who bootstrapped and built it themselves and have put in their own money. You know, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the founder has to have to rationalize. Does he or she have the independent resources to just say, I don't need these term sheets.
Right.
I'm going to go forward on my own and get a high evaluation. You know, when I talk at schools or any events, they say, hey, what is it that you do most? and sometimes jokingly, I say, talk valuation to founders. And so,
yep.
If you can afford to do that, then you should reach out to the investors, tell them thanks, but no thanks. I think we're worth appreciably more. Don't be smug. Don't be snarky. Just don't. You'd be surprised how many founders, you probably wouldn't, have passed on something, been smug, and then just ran out of money. And then you burned a bridge. Mm-hmm. And now you're out, you need money, and now you're vulnerable. And so, and if you can realistically afford to move forward, go ahead. But you also have to rationalize how many VCs did you talk to? I tell founders, I tell my companies, you exist in the market.
What?
I sold only a couple companies over $1 billion. And so you need to look at a realistic price. The market says that this is what the value of this company is. And then to me, the only of the decision is, do you have the means to continue forward without accepting one of these term sheets? And I don't have to tell you overwhelmingly, that's the main issue. It's price. It's not board seats. It's not anti-dilution. You know, it's price.
Yeah. They think it's valued at a higher.
Yeah.
They're at a different place.
So it's and if there's a delta, a reasonable delta, try to negotiate the delta. there's no one sitting on my side of the table who hasn't been through a pricing valuation discussion. But if you're worlds apart, and I guess the question for the founders is, if you're worlds apart with every term sheet, maybe the investors aren't wrong. Now, if you're worlds apart and you've spoken with 5 to 6 investors, and there's one you really like, and they came in the lowest, maybe you can go and triangulate. Everything's a negotiation, unfortunately.
100%. 100%. So, okay. Term sheets and deals, and then what are, let's say you get a board seat, you're on their board, you have the 180-day plan. What are some of the things that are, how should I say it? What are some of the best, so you have the 180-day plan, you're looking kind of further out. At what point what kind of red flags are the more common things that kind of pop up in those couple years kind of post-investment, where it requires conversation and potentially heading in a different direction?
I think when there have been red flags, a lot of it was around communication. One thing for an investor is you get to know the CEO, you get to know the founder, but you want to get to know all the senior people. You want to get their feedback. They're senior C-level people because they're important. And sometimes a red flag is when the CEO or founder and co-founders don't want you to get to know, don't want you to have access to the rest of the team. And that will generally show itself in diligence. So that's a big red flag. That to me, that's one of the largest. At the lower end, you want to hit your number, you want to do that, but diligence can be somewhat, it's a distraction to run a company while you're doing a full diligence. We do a thorough diligence. So you come out, you hit your number. Are you making the investments that we outlined in the 180-day plan? Do they all of a sudden sort of give you the Heisman and they're not available to talk and aren't as communicative? The red flags are generally around communication. If you're communicating with us, we not every deal is a home run, and we're working together. Maybe there was things we all missed. We're going to stand by you and work hard to get this to a rational outcome. But the red flags are generally around communication and access.
Yeah, access to all the kind of senior C-level folks to talk to them about what's going on and what's happening and how they view things, and as part of due diligence and on an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
So from
you should be. Have you ever made an investment, angel investment?
I have not.
You have not. You should. You've been in this so long. You should feel what it is to sit on the side of the table.
That is an excellent point. I've sat on this side of the table.
Even just an angel investment, you'll get the same feeling.
Yeah, and that communication, you want to hear what's going on and what's happening, and
not
3 days after something hits the fan.
There's negative aspects of everything. And so, hey, what bothers you? What keeps you up at night? Can't be nothing. I mean, my wife and I have been married, over 20 years now. And if I just stopped one day and said, hey, what am I doing wrong? And the next thing I look down at my watch, I'm like, damn, it's been 15 minutes. She's still talking. So
you asked the question.
Talk about, right?
Open the door. I'm
So,
reading this book. I'm part of this entrepreneurial group, and it meets in the mornings, Monday
mhm,
through Friday. And we're reading You Owe You by Eric Thomas.
mhm.
And one of the things he talks about in the chapter we're on right now is basically doing a performance assessment with all the important people in your life. I mean, yes, work and your job, but also, like you said,
Oh yeah.
like, asking your spouse or asking your kids or asking, how's it going? How am I doing? So I was reading it last night and thinking, I wonder what my son will say.
How old is your son?
Just turned 13.
Ooh, that's one of the optimal ages of like male candor. Like, honestly, at 13, you still feel indestructible. You still feel like there's
Mhm.
nothing can go wrong. You should ask. That's a hell of an exercise. You should ask him.
I will when I have some time, like the weekend.
Be mentally prepared for the answers.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Male candor. I can't wait.
yeah. Well, it's also, I mean, boys just kind of they're just. I mean, I've got 3 sons.
How old are yours?
They just live in their own little world sometimes.
Mm.
My sons are 11, 10, and 5. So
Fun.
yeah, and so but no, I've heard that. See if everyone are they helping you? Are they, it's that's tough. And I tell my portfolio companies, how can I help you? Talk to them once a week, once every 2 weeks. Mostly actually more than once a week. How can I help you? Here's how I think I can help you. How do you think I can help you? And it's really when we're both aligned with how I can help you, that's when we're doing really well. Oh, you need me to do that too? Okay, that's fine.
It makes, absolutely. Because you want to see them succeed, right?
Yes,
You want to
I
see them
want
do
to see
well.
this.
You invested. I often share with people, you need to understand people's motivation. So if you're selling something into the healthcare system, you need to think
Mhm.
about the patient, whoever's touching it, right? Who's ever using it, who's ever prescribing it, who's paying for it, who's reimbursing it, right?
Yeah,
All of these folks, and what are the incentives, right? What do they want to do? What do they want to happen?
and I think, and the other thing is be prepared over time that could change. We're I think our average hold period is just over 6 years. It's a long time. And things can change. There are a lot of companies 24 months ago that were deemed unicorns that frankly aren't anymore. And so everyone has to now readjust their expectations, cut the burn, and rationalize what is success now.
That is a great question. What is success now? It's not what it was 12 months ago, right?
No, something completely different.
Certainly not what it was in 2019.
Yeah, exactly right. You're exactly right.
So
That was very much a different time.
What to that point about what is success now, right? We know what happened to Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic, and the lots of chatter about investment ratcheting downward at a rapid pace. I'm wondering from your standpoint, has there been any pullback? Are you still kind of steadily moving forward to your plan? And what does that look like?
There's been no major pullback. I mean, we're a key indicator of success for us historically has always been growth at time and investment. And what you now have seen is outside of a couple of segments, growth has slowed. Sales cycles have elongated. But we're still making investments. Now, what every investment or investor has done is they have to really tend to their portfolio, get the burn down, try to ensure people or these entities have enough capital on the balance sheets. You prefer to not raise money until second half of next year, because that's when everyone believes that things will be a little more on solid footing. And so you're getting in with your portfolios to a much, much more intimate degree, and reserving capital for their needs. And then you're going to look for the new investments. And then I do have peers that just said, we're just going to sit out for the next X number of months. And they don't, I think the macro they believe could go a little longer, or they just don't want to risk it.
Yeah,
but my sense is the particularly public entities, they're going to need to show growth, and they're not going to be able to get on there organically. So they'll go back to, they'll become much more acquisitive, 3 quarters from
Yeah,
now.
that makes a lot of sense. And it makes sense that you're reserving more capital for your current companies because the trajectory has perhaps extended a little bit.
Yeah.
Based on current market
conditions. This may add 12 to 20 months in terms of a hold period for some companies, and some of which were not break even yet. Many of which weren't break even yet. So you need to reserve more capital for that.
Yeah, until they get to that point in time.
Yeah.
Just to kind of roll back really quickly, I get a lot of questions about pitch decks. And I was, for a period of time, I don't know, 5, 6 or so years, part of this Duke Startup Challenge judging. And then they shifted that to only have venture capital folks do that, which I totally understand. And there's another group, this Rosamond Institute, whom I help a bit with some of the founders' startups messaging. And I'm doing one-on-ones with them right now with their pitch decks, right? So that's one of the reasons why I asked you about the definition of that up front.
So you've seen thousands at this point. So tell me, how are their decks this year? Do they get better every year? Because the information available is off the charts now, right? So are the decks getting better every year?
I would say a little bit. I think there's still, I think one of the things is that what I see is, as a founder, is you have to be so focused on your business and so kind of, shall I say, like in the weeds, that you become, and you have to kind of fall in love with that and what's happening and what you've done and how it builds out and your team and that oftentimes it's difficult to something so incredibly well. It's difficult to step back from that and kind of tell the broader story, tell the higher level story. There's a tendency to want to, kind of stuff 1,000 pounds into a 1 pound sack in the pitch deck. So what I try to do is, and a lot of times they bury the lead. They think it should go in a specific way, and they bury the lead. It's like bullet point 6. A couple weeks ago, I saw one where it was literally like slide 7, bullet point 6. And there were 2 other things that they had said. And I was like, hold on, time out. This is your story. This is your story. This is what you need to, talk about, like on the first slide.
Right.
This is the story, because people understand. They were looking at getting into a new market and something that had done very well with other, how should I say it, similar things in healthcare, but no one had yet addressed this portion of it. And it's not transferable. One, you couldn't transfer from one to the other one easily.
Right.
And they understood it better than anybody. They had advantages over the kind of old school surgical procedure, but they weren't telling that story about like why this is totally different, why the folks who are doing A.
What was the
be able to do B.
entrepreneur's background?
Technical. They were technical folks.
More technical.
Yeah, R&D.
So I do healthcare and cyber, and I do a lot of deck fixing. They're not natural storytellers.
Right.
That's fine. But yeah. Okay.
That's yeah. So this last group of finalists, now there are 8 of them. They have a 5-minute pitch coming up, and one of the things I told them is that you need to take your 20. For example, one person with whom I spoke said you need to take your 23 slide deck and like throw it out, turn the computer off, and stand at a whiteboard, and you need to draw like what are the 5 most important things you need to convey, and how are you going to do that, and work on the flow of that and what that looks like. And when you've drawn it out and it makes sense, then go build. I know you said you do not like PowerPoint, but then go build your PowerPoint. If you try to take 23 slides,
it needs to be 5 slides. If it's 5 minutes, it needs to be 5 slides, not 23.
Right. Like, don't try to rush and get through it. People will get nothing, right? You talked about the message being what investors are left with at the end. And I say with 5 slides, like everyone needs to hit like a sledgehammer. There needs to be like one major blow your hair back, ideally, kind of point. And I don't expect it to get necessarily to that level, but that idea of you're trying to hammer home one specific point on each slide. So when they leave, you said that we keep one major thing with us. Maybe they keep a couple. But I go, that's what questions are for. That's what the Q&A.
Exactly right.
You need to convince them that you're worth walking over to and talking to, or picking up the phone, or whatever it is that happens afterwards.
What's going to make them want to talk to me again? Think of this pitch. I told one guy, and I don't know if it was the right thing. I told a guy and a female entrepreneurs, think of it as a first date. What do you want to convey to make them want to go on a second date?
I actually have a LinkedIn post to that effect.
Do you?
I do. I'll have to send it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm like, it's something to the effect of you don't propose marriage on the first date.
No.
Generally.
Generally, yeah. I didn't.
I actually had a group I was talking to over a year ago, and the one guy was like, I did. And I was like, wow, you are.
Wow. Is he married? Is he still married?
Yes.
Good for him. Love at first sight.
I was like, that is completely impressive. And also, not the norm.
Well, no, you can teach them love at first sight. Huh. Okay. Good for him.
He said he knew that she was the one.
Well, you'll have to dig him up and talk to the missus there. See if she love at first sight.
That would be a fun interview.
I guess if it's love at first sight, it doesn't have to be returned initially, because you wouldn't expect it to be. But the other person I don't know. We're going off on a tangent here.
That's okay. No, I have a good friend of mine, very happily married, 2 kids, like just such a totally awesome couple. And she said that when they first met, he was very taken with her, and she was like, no.
That's kind of the way it is. There's this unevenness. That's what I've always learned. And then it sort of evens out over time.
I forget what she said, but it was like the 3rd date. I think it was her brother who said, go see him again. It's, or he came up to see her or whatever. They were in different states at the time. She was kind of like,
Eh,
he's like, give it a couple of days. So by the date 3, she thought,
he's growing on. Okay, good.
Exactly.
Good.
Yeah. So I hear stories of kind of unevenness. I like the idea of we should call him and talk to him and his wife. That would be interesting. So anything that I haven't asked you that you were hoping I would ask you, or you would want kind of aspiring health IT, kind of enterprise medtech folks to know about pitching, know about
I would just say be believe in yourself. You know, the seat we sit in is pretty hard, and we're not going to know everything. So every time if you're faced with rejection, it's not always you. It could be an inability for someone to understand and to grasp, frankly, the magnitude of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And that's why there's hundreds of VCs and potential investors to talk to. But certainly work with people like you, Maureen, that can help you refine your message so that you're putting your best foot forward.
That's great advice. Yeah. Really the second part of that. No kidding. So yeah, it's definitely true. What it reminds me of is that someone says like there's gold in them hills, right? The idea that there are gems, the word you used before, in there. Sometimes you have to mine a bit to get to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Figure out what they are and how to tell them and how to talk about it. So a couple a little bit more fun questions. When you think about yourself and kind of your career and coming up, for folks who are getting out of college and the idea of founding a company looks super exciting, or getting into the investment field looks very appealing, what kind of advice would you give them?
I would say try to find an industry that's a passion. Like, what do you have a passion for? And something that because generally, if you're passionate about something, you'll want to continue to learn, and you'll have the curiosity. So when I interview someone young, it really is their curiosity that I'm trying to peg. I don't know everything, and if you're 22 or 25, you certainly don't know everything either. So you've got to be a learner. You've got to be a willing learner. And I think the other thing is try to read a lot about the industry and what it does. I think a lot of people don't know really what VCs and private equity and growth equity people do. They have an idea, and reach out and talk to us. I talk to dozens every year about my job. Don't want to get into it. I'll talk to anyone.
That's great advice. Great advice. So, more personal question: if you could take, let's say, all of your responsibilities are momentarily erased for like 3 to 5 days, and your wives and your kids don't have to go to school, where would you all travel to?
Ooh, 3 to 5 days.
Or longer. You can pick the time frame. How's that?
You know what? My two oldest, for some reason, out of nowhere, wanted to go to Australia. And it's not a place I wanted to go. I didn't dislike Australia. It just wasn't, on the list. So just out of the sake of making them happy, Australia. But while we're over there in the neck of the woods, Hawaii, just because I went there my freshman year at Stanford. We played in the Aloha Bowl. I went to Stanford on a football scholarship. And I just think it's one of the prettiest places on earth.
Any particular island?
We were in the Big Island, and I would just love to walk on the beach and just hold my wife's hand.
Oh,
It's a beautiful place.
That is amazing, and a wonderful place to end. If people want to get a hold of you, how should they do that?
You can just reach out to me, lmarcus@edisonpartners.com.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed all your insights and sharing what's going on in healthcare IT and what's happening in how you work through the process of deciding on an investment.
Sure.
And demystifying that for folks. And I wish you much happiness on your future trip to Australia with a stop with your family.
No problem. Of course.
All right. Well, that's it for The Message Engineer. We'll see you next time.